The next version of Apple's cheapest iPhone is here, and it looks exactly like the last one. With its home button, top and bottom bezels, and rounded corners, the new iPhone SE is nearly identical to the 2020 model, at least on the outside. Inside, this year's version packs an A15 Bionic chip and 5G radios, promising a serious speed upgrade. Apple is also touting longer battery life and improved durability on this year's model, which will set you back a modest $429. That's $30 more than the last iPhone SE, but still cheaper than the Pixel 5a. If you want a simple iPhone that runs like new and you don't mind a dated design and single rear camera, the iPhone SE might fit the bill. At a time when basically all smartphones have done away with home buttons, this year's iPhone SE feels anachronistic. Its home button sits in a bezel below the screen, while the top bezel hides the device's front camera. If you're familiar with the last iPhone SE, then you'll know what to expect. This year's model is so similar that I legit have trouble telling them apart. The only way I know which one I'm holding is if I scrutinize the phone's rear casing under a fluorescent light. The review unit Apple sent this year is a very dark blue, while the 2020 iPhone SE in my possession is black. Oh, and according to the spec sheets, the new SE is a whole 4 grams lighter. Considering the earlier model already looked outdated, externally, the latest iPhone feels very much stuck in the past. Still, in spite of its stodgy design, I like the way the SE feels. It's very similar to the Pixel 3, slim, slightly curved, and solidly built. The iPhone 13 mini is a little smaller and thicker, with flatter edges and a notch at the top of its 5.4-inch screen that houses its front camera. If you hate notches, but for some reason don't mind bezels, the iPhone SE's retro look is for you. More importantly, Apple says the iPhone SE is covered in the same hardy glass used on the iPhone 13. While I have yet to drop my review unit, knowing that this will be more scratch resistant offers some peace of mind. I don't use a case with the iPhone 13, and it's still pristine despite having been tossed into bags with keys and other sharp objects. It does pick up fingerprints and smudges like crazy, though. It's also nice that the iPhone SE is rated IP67 for dust and water resistance, something that the Galaxy A52 5G and the Pixel 5a also offer. Like many phones from 2017, this year's iPhone SE sports a 4.7-inch Retina screen with a less common 1334 by 750 resolution. Honestly, those specs are downright tragic for 2022 standards, where we've got lovely OLEDs everywhere that offer deep blacks and vibrant colors. Don't even get me started on that refresh rate. The Galaxy A52 has a 6.5-inch Super AMOLED running at 120 Hz, while the Pixel 5a's OLED panel at least refreshes at 90 Hz. I used the iPhone SE, its predecessor, the iPhone 13 mini, and the Pixel 5a to watch a recap of the Apple event on YouTube at the same time at max brightness. The iPhone 13 mini was the brightest, followed by the Pixel. The two iPhone SEs were indistinguishable from each other and had a reddish tint compared to the others. It's not going to wow you, but the iPhone SE's display is serviceable. I watched the beginning of The Problem with Jon Stewart on the TV Plus app, and though everything looked somewhat muted compared to the OLEDs that I'm used to, the show still looked fine. You'll definitely want to push the screen to max brightness to watch videos under sunlight, though. The iPhone SE's biggest disadvantage in the mid-range space is its cameras. It has just one rear 12-megapixel sensor with an f1.8 aperture, but most of the competition come with at least 2 now, making them more versatile shooting rigs. But if you're content with a solo camera, you'll find the iPhone SE 2022 satisfying. It takes surprisingly sharp and colorful photos that are on par with the iPhone 13 minis. Ornaments on the red brick facade of an NYU building looked equally crisp on shots from both phones, even when I zoomed all the way in. It's clear that with the A15 Bionic and processing upgrades like Smart HDR4, Apple's been able to make the iPhone SE's camera perform as well as the main sensor on its flagship. The Pixel 5a generally produced darker images with cooler, more neutral tones in its images, and although I'm not a fan of Apple's default treatment, which has a slightly yellowish tinge, you do have the ability to change that. The company introduced photographic styles with the iPhone 13 series, which lets you adjust preset profiles for contrast and tone. Every picture you capture will use those settings until you pick a different style. The new iPhone SE also offers photographic styles, so you can exercise a bit more control over how your shots turn out. I was surprised by how similar the iPhone SE's pictures were to the iPhone 13 minis. From landscapes to portraits of my coworkers, there were barely any differences in the shots taken by those two phones. The Pixel 5a was better at isolating our video producer's spiky hairline from the background than either iPhone, but all three devices performed admirably. Our main complaint about the last iPhone SE's camera was that there was no night mode. This year's model still doesn't offer one, and though some of the pictures I took of buildings surrounded by mist one night came out muddy, some others turned out bright and sharp. It's likely that my shivering hands contributed to the blur, but in general, Google still retains an advantage in low light. Up front, the iPhone SE's 7-megapixel camera also falls short of the competition on paper, but in reality it performed just as well as the Pixel 5a and iPhone 13 mini. It struggled to keep up in dim environments though, with a more noticeable difference in the selfies I shot inside a stationary car one night. The iPhone SE's photos weren't as clean as the others, but they were still good enough to share. Synthetic benchmarks don't paint the most complete picture of a phone's performance, but in a pinch, they're a good point of reference. The iPhone SE's Geekbench 5 scores blew away the Galaxy S22 series and even came close to matching the iPhone 13 Pro. In everyday use, the A15 Bionic was powerful enough for most of my tasks, including editing and exporting a minute-long video in iMovie. That makes sense given Apple equipped its budget phone with the same powerful A15 Bionic chip found in its flagship series. I did notice some delays while setting up the phone, with a noticeable pause between when I tapped continue and when the next page came up. I also couldn't screen record while using SharePlay on a FaceTime video call to show my homepage to my colleague, but that seemed to be a buffering issue. Everything else, though, ran smoothly. The iPhone SE did get a little warm while I ran tests and used the camera's live text feature to scan the addresses on a bottle and looking them up in maps. Thankfully, though, it cooled back down quickly. As someone who's grown accustomed to gesture-based navigation, I needed to reacquaint myself with using a home key again. Unlocking the phone was a breeze, and if you're familiar with the last iPhone SE's sensor, you'll be used to this, especially since the hardware is exactly the same. In fact, if you've never known life without the button below the screen and don't want to give it up, this is the only modern phone around with it. One area where small phones like the iPhone SE and iPhone 13 mini tend to fall short is battery life. Apple promised that the A15 Bionic would bring better endurance to this year's iPhone SE, and that turned out to be true. In daily use, the new iPhone SE typically lasted about a day before needing a charge. I spent one morning and afternoon testing its camera and display, and by 6 p.m. it had dropped to 46%. Later at about 9 p.m. it had fallen to 37%, and I hadn't done much besides take a few nighttime photos. The iPhone SE definitely won't survive your after-work nights out. I do appreciate that in addition to the Lightning port, the iPhone SE charges wirelessly. It also supports sub-6 5G and can work with mid-band networks as well. Those hoping for ultra-wideband for more precise AirTag locations will be disappointed though. Apple didn't include it here. Millimeter wave 5G is also a missing feature, though with the lack of widely available, reliable coverage, that's more understandable. If you're considering the iPhone SE, you've probably already decided that Android isn't for you. But I feel it's my duty to inform you that at this price range, non-Apple offerings often come with better specs. Sure, the A15 Bionic is the most powerful chip you're going to get at this price, but nowadays most mid-range phones come with competent processors. You probably won't notice a huge difference in daily performance between the iPhone SE and the Pixel 5a, which uses a Snapdragon 765G. What you're likely to miss out on by sticking to Apple is beautiful OLED panels with faster screen refresh rates. The Pixel 5a and Galaxy A52 also come with multi-camera systems that will make shooting landscapes or faraway objects easier. But if you'd rather stick to a familiar ecosystem, or if the person who you're buying this for doesn't need those things, the iPhone SE is a safe choice. If you're in the market for a small, cheaper iPhone, you've probably also got your eye on the iPhone 13 mini. For about $270 more, it brings a nicer full-screen display, additional rear camera, and updated design. You'll have to finally let go of the home button and Touch ID, sure, and also get used to a notch for the selfie camera, but those are fairly minor trade-offs.
I do want to point out that the base model's 64 gigs of storage is measly. I've barely installed all my usual apps on my review unit, and there's already about 22 gigs gone. You'll definitely want to spend the extra $50 for the 128 gig version at least, which is what the entry-level iPhone 13 mini includes.
For the price, the iPhone SE offers many advanced features like a premium processor, 5G support, and iOS 15. With these, Apple's mid-range phone is likely to keep running respectably for at least 2 more years. But some of its other aspects are practically ancient, like its cramped screen and limited camera setup. If you're hell-bent on getting an iPhone for under $500 and you don't want a refurbished or second-hand version of previous flagships, the iPhone SE is good enough. Plus, this is the only iPhone around that still has Touch ID, which many people prefer over Face ID. Those who want superior cameras and displays, though, should at least consider the Galaxy A52 or the iPhone 13. If you can wait a little longer and don't mind Android, there's also a chance Google's next mid-range Pixel will be a better deal. For now, it's nice to see a new iPhone SE that brings modern performance and connectivity in a design that fans of smaller phones will enjoy. It's basic, but it gets the job done. For more in-depth reviews of Android mid-range phones, laptops, wearables, and other devices, make sure you subscribe to Engadget. And as always, thank you for watching.